Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's exploration of sludge metal, still trying to figure out what this genre is, seeing if we can't find any correlations between the tracks that we get this week. Today we're going to be checking out Melvins, which honestly for some reason I had in my head as a punk band. I don't know why. Let's dive into this. We're going to be looking at something off of their Houdini album, which comes from 1993. We're looking at something like track 5 or something, called Honey Bucket. Let's dive in and see what's going on today. There's so much compression, there's so much distortion on these guitars. You can barely make out the individual picks. Yeah, the articulation and the attacks is barely present. This is so far away from what I was expecting. That's playful. I think it's the vocal effects. It's giving me Rob Zombie vibes, but I think there's something in the music too. It's been a long time since I listened to Rob Zombie though, so I can't pinpoint what's making me think of that. Okay. I think the first thing that really intrigues me is that I honestly thought this was an instrumental. It's only 3 minutes long, and at like the 1.5 minute point, we still hadn't had any vocals. It really cram all the vocals in the end. And even if we had all the way up to the final bit of the track, we'd still only have about 90 seconds worth to put the vocals in. But the last 20 to 30 seconds is a transition to the next track, I assume. It's an ambient sound that's just kind of is. The song abruptly stops and we have this brrrr and it kind of rises in pitch. It feels so disjointed from the rest of the track. I don't want to view it in relationship to Honey Bucket. To me, it's a portion of the album. It's what takes us from Honey Bucket to the next track, probably. Maybe when we hit the lyrics, it'll make sense to have that idea there, but musically, I can't make any sense of it. So the lyrics fill up like 50 to 60 seconds of the track. Everything else is riffage. It's an interesting way to go about crafting a song. It's so short and they take so long to get into what I would call the meat of the track. We go through several ideas at the beginning of the song, and all of them seem to be setting up the next thing. It's like a series of intros that are slowly getting us to where the first verse kicks in. And then we do the first verse, we do the second verse, and the song's just over at that point. It's, like I said, structurally, it's very interesting. I think it might make a bit more sense on a second time through, but like I said, you hit the 50% mark of a song and you haven't heard any lyrics yet. I don't think it is unfair to assume you're in store for an instrumental. Now, speaking of the instruments, this is bass, guitar, drums. It's heavy, it's big. I want to talk about the production real quick. The guitars. I had mentioned that there's so much overdrive and distortion on these instruments. It's very difficult to even hear, if it's audible at all, the articulation on the notes, the attack itself. When you use a pick to pick a string, you're actually introducing force to it, and the string gets pulled down, and then because it is pulled tight at two ends, it bounces back up, and then it vibrates between those 2 points, with the wavelength shortening over time until it comes to a rest. That initial put of force, when you initially hit it and you put that force into the string and it begins to vibrate, it creates a very specific sound. It can be lighter or harder depending on how hard you're using your pick, but there's a very distinct moment when the noise breaks. And this is similar with most instruments. Coming from a trumpet background, I can tell you that when you cross the threshold of just pushing air through your lips to when you begin to buzz your lips, which produces the sound in the trumpet, that initial attack, depending on how soft you're trying to do it, but you can usually feel an articulation at the beginning that's different than the sustain. That's the attack. Here, though, they've covered it up, but in a similar way to how black metal works, or shoegaze, where you can't hear the articulation, you just sort of hear the note. It just sort of appears without an attack. I don't know if this feels weird to anyone else. I think it's one of the reasons that black metal and shoegaze particularly, but also to a lesser extent post-rock and sometimes post-metal, they sound foreign to me. They sound alien. It's because attacks or notes typically don't have attacks. There's no start to a note. It simply just becomes into existence. Overdrive and compression at certain levels will do that. It sounds so bizarre to me. It really does. Especially since, like I've said, I've grown up on rock and metal. It's not, the electric guitar is not completely foreign to me, but very few genres completely lean into that sound so far in order to erase attacks. It's just such an alien sound. So when we get something like this, though, that isn't the 16th note picking or the tremolo picking that we would get in some of those genres that focus on the heavy distortion, and we get something here that's more hard rock, maybe. I suppose there's a little bit of thrashiness in there as well, but it just doesn't feel fast enough for me to say, oh, this is clearly thrash metal. But when we have these clearly defined notes, there's varying rhythm to this song in the riffs in it, and we don't get those attacks. It just sounds so bizarre to me. I don't know if anyone else gets that, but it stands out every single time the guitar is picked, and I don't hear that attack on it. I'm like, dang, this is just like, it's so weird. I don't know. It's like it'd be like if the whole world were walking backwards tomorrow, and I was still walking forwards. Like I know what walking backwards looks like. It's not like that's foreign. It's just like no one does it. It's just not the way things work. And that's sort of what this feels like. I clearly know why it sounds the way it does. It's just so bizarre. So yeah, that's something I did not get over at all in this track. Now, the riffs here come frequently. They go by fast. They only do each riff like 8 repetitions and then they're on to the next. I don't think any of them stood out to where I could hum it, having just listened to it one time. But I think part of that is also the linearity of it. Aside from when we hit the verse, when the vocals come in and we actually stick with a riff idea for a while, like I said, everything else is here and gone. You don't really listen to them very long. They're already moving on to the next idea. There's a speed, there's an urgency in the beginning of the track that I think is interesting because it isn't until when we start moving into that first main section where the vocals are coming in, we have an accelerando there. We actually increase the tempo on the second half of the track, but it doesn't feel as manic as the beginning because the beginning is just bouncing between ideas in a linear fashion too. I don't think we repeat any riffs. We just do a riff, we repeat it like 8 times. We do another riff, we repeat it for 8 times. We do another riff, we repeat it for 8 times. It's just constantly moving forward onto the next idea. It feels very scatterbrained. It doesn't really know what it wants to do. So it's just doing a lot of stuff and then it lands somewhere on, like, I think it was a single note, right? Single note or a single chord, and just hitting it over and over and over as the tempo increased. And then we got into the main area. I don't really know what to think of this song. I don't know how to read it. I think because it went by so fast, but I came in with the wrong expectations. I thought it was punk. I know we're in sludge metal weeks. Oh, speaking of that, I want to touch on that real quick too. But yeah, like as far as atmosphere goes, this sits in the same place that a lot of early metal, heavy metal, early death metal, thrash metal, where it just is. Almost everything in this track feels rule of cool. It's very functional. The guitar riffs sound great. The drumming does what it needs to do. We have a few fills in here. It also just is the metronome for a lot of this. The vocals come in. The melody's not catchy, but it's not abrasive either. It's functional. It's a method. It's a delivery method for the lyrics. Like, nothing in here really stands out as something that serves a greater purpose rather than to build a song to deliver, to play. And like I said, a lot of earlier metal and later metal that's still based off of those earlier sounds, it's where I sit with a lot of it. It sounds aggressive, it sounds metal, but I'm not really reading much into it. And I don't think I should. Just because the sound of the song is aggressive doesn't mean that the lyrics are. And we've done a lot of tracks similar to this with a similar sound where we get through the lyrics. I'm like, I just don't see a synergy between the lyrical themes and musical themes, but I expect that from this genre, and that's where I'm at here. The song just sounds aggressive to me from start to finish, and I don't really get a story from it. I get music. It sounds in silence. And not to be, yeah, it sounds in silence. We're just gonna end it right there. Now, sludge. I listened to Cult of Luna yesterday. They're atmospheric sludge that borders on post metal. This I'm going to assume is sludge metal. I don't hear anything else in here. Yesterday I definitely picked up on the post-metal elements. But to me this still just sounds like metal. The big difference though, the riffage, the drums, even the vocal melody. This all sounds pretty typical of some type of metal. Heavy metal, like I said, a little bit of thrash in there. The vocals remind me of Creeping Death now. I think it's the melody. I said Rob Zombie earlier, which, yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, I guess. But there is one thing here that differentiates them from the other styles, and it's production. Much like black metal, I think sludge is going to be one of those genres that are maybe it does have a compositional element. Like black metal, you can play black metal slower, but a lot of it is that speed metal. This, I feel like sludge metal probably has a heavy metal base to it, but the thing is, the production, just like black metal, has their production. And the production here is grimy. Something we saw in both yesterday and today's is just absolutely gnarly, filthy guitar tones. And I think that's fitting that the first thing I talked about, and probably the biggest section in this analysis portion, was how the guitars sounded to me. Granted, I focused on how they utilize the effects they have in order to cover up something I deem rather important um, to my listening, my understanding of music. But I still focused on a production element more so than a compositional one. And part of that is also just because the composition in here is rather light. It's, as I mentioned, functional. I don't think anything in here really stands out to me. But it's not supposed to. It creates a vibe, it creates a feel. And I think at the end of the day, that's what they were aiming for. And that might sort of be what all sludge metal aims for. I'm curious to get into more of this genre throughout the week, though, and see what happens compositionally. I'm definitely going to be paying attention to production. I think that's going to be a key aspect of the genre, but I'm curious how wide of a range the composition can go while still being classified as sludge metal. And on the topic of production, the vocal production's just it's something. I don't know what to make of it. It's fine. I'm not saying it's wrong in any way, but there's like I don't know. It's like double vision, but not double vision. It's a little foggy maybe, a little blurry might be a way to describe it. It's like a delay that's also pitched up to harmonize, but the delay is only like a fraction of a second off. And it's more like an after image more so than an echo. It's a very interesting way to go about producing the vocals. And as I mentioned, they were just not what I expected as at all as heavy and gritty and gnarly as the guitar is. We get this vocal line that's kind of tame. I think I've just been I don't know. I don't know the word for it. We've listened to so much metal on the channel that when I hear something like this, I expect growls and harshes now. And when we didn't get that, I was like, oh, okay, that's different. I don't know. Let's hit some lyrics, see what's going on there, and then we'll wrap this one up. I don't know. It just seems like a series of isolated ideas. There is a general focus on speed of some sort. At the beginning, it says 8 times a felon for fire. So we got an arsonist on our hands. So it's like cobalt, cast, and clean. I got a motor, felt the wheel, real fast, and fear. Like it alludes to the idea of driving a car real fast. And it says try jacket, black it for more, handcuffs with special keys, triple lies and been down defiled, it's a VSI. I don't get this line at all, and this is just where things begin to fall apart for me. It says, throw a case of plasticine down, baby, I can immolate. Bringing fire back into the conversation from our first stanza. He says, and it's rotten in my rounds, sisters in my way. I'm as fast as my hometown, green glass, and most of all, been around this foreign cage, an image in the wall. Yeah, I don't know. I'm completely lost on this. It is way beyond. It's either beyond my ability to dissect metaphor or to see additional meaning, or there's like one specific topic I just don't have. Like all these words probably make sense if you have this one key, this one topic to tie it all together, and I don't know what they're talking about, so it's really difficult to me to really difficult for me to find how all of it lines up. And that might be it right there. I'm just missing the legend for this map. So I guess we're just gonna leave it there. Those are my thoughts on Melvin's Honey Bucket. That even makes less sense. The song title feels like it has nothing to do with this either. Yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comment section if you enjoyed it, anything you liked about it, your own thoughts, perspectives, opinions. Maybe you have a take or an understanding of what the lyrics are supposed to mean. Let me know. Put all that stuff down there in the comments. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link for Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this one, but we do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. We're going to continue on with some sludge metal. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.